think you're recording now. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to breakout session number 3 on day 1 of the Shifting Seasons Summit, the 3rd installment, as Sarah Smith said this morning. I hope you guys all enjoyed the opening ceremonies. That was really wonderful to hear from all the amazing leaders out there in the climate world or in the environmental world. So you are in the right place if you meant to come here. If you're here, this is the overview of ITEP's course, ITEP's Tribes and Climate Change course, which is the Introduction to Climate Change Adaptation Planning. This course usually takes 3 days to do, in person, 5 days virtual, half virtual days, that kind of work. So if you hear knocking, my husband's redoing our bathroom, so don't mind it. So we're going to go over really briefly what the course usually entails, but then we are going to highlight at least 2 steps and of the framework. But we are also hoping that you can and would participate because we have questions. We want to hear from you what you're looking for. You may have taken an ITEP course and maybe you just need a refresher, that kind of stuff. So please participate if you can. That would be wonderful because we like to engage, not just talk at. So that would be awesome if you could do that. And Kelsey has put our program website into the chat box. And I think there's not that many people on here, so I may ask people if they're willing to also introduce themselves. Maybe in the chat box, tell us where you're from and whatnot. I think people have the capability to unmute, right? And talk. Okay, awesome. So first of all, again, you're in the right place. We're talking about ITEP's. This is one of the first courses that we created going back all the way to 2005. It started off as a small course and then it just kept growing. And we're here today doing conference sessions for the Shifting Season Summit. So without a great team of people, we would not be where we're at today. But I also would like to recognize my former supervisor, Sue Watkins. She's now known as Sue Rose, who helped create this program based on ITEP's air quality training programs. So we just kind of took a little bit from them and created this course. And so she actually worked with Chris Caldwell and the rest of the Shifting Season staff for I think the first 2 summits that happened, and she helped out with that. And so we're happy to be here today. My co-manager is Karen Cozzetto, based in Boulder. She's not here today, but we also have Dara Marks Marino, who also works with the National Tribal Air Association, and Marissa Chile, our executive director. And then we also have Julie Maldonado on staff. We love collaborating with her. She's with the Liken Network. LIKEN network, and also one of the facilitators and creators of the Rising Voices workshops that happens each year. And also our admin assistant, we couldn't really function without, is Lorene Lewis. But I also like my colleagues to introduce themselves. Kelsey, we'll go to you first, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Sure, thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Morales. I am the Senior Community Program Coordinator, and usually I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona, but today calling in from Whitefish, Montana. And yeah, I'll go ahead and pass it to Colleen. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Colleen Cooley. I'm one of these research specialists with ITEP's Tribes and Climate Change program. And I'm tuning in from Shanto, which is located on the Navajo Nation. Thank you for joining us today.
Wonderful. Is anybody from the audience willing to introduce themselves? We don't have a lot of people, so you have time. I don't recognize anyone, so I can't really pick on anyone. If you don't mind putting it in the chat box where you're from. The Zoom chat box, if you can. So we're gonna go focus on the Zoom chat box. And Marissa, you are showing your beautiful face.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marissa Weiss. I'm affiliated with the NECASC based at UMass, and I live in Northampton, Massachusetts. And glad to meet you all.
Welcome. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm giving you a preview of my slides. Great, I'm so glad. Anyone else? I know we have Florencia from the University of Minnesota. We also have Ashley Trudeau from Madison, Wisconsin, who's a graduate student studying fisheries management. And she's here to learn more about transforming governance for climate change adaptation plans. That's wonderful. Thank you for being here. I think we'll touch a little bit on that. We need 3 to 5 days for that, for really in depth of how to do that. So anyone else want to volunteer? We have less than 70 minutes to do it. Andrew, thank you for joining us. He's a researcher from the Northeast Cask at UMass Amherst, working under Dr. Richard Palmer on flood and drought modeling with climate change. Right on. Thank you for joining us. Bill, did you want to introduce yourself? No pressure. I just heard you unmute.
Yes, I'm Bill Van Lopik. I'm an adjunct instructor at the College of Denomination, teaching in sustainability.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes. We have Marissa, who's from San Francisco, currently working on GIS at ESRI or ESRI, but soon to be environmental science and policy student at Clark University, interested in climate adaptation planning. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Bill, good to see your beautiful face also. All right. All right. If no one else wants to jump at the chance to talk, you will have many more opportunities later on. I would love to hear from you, whether it's in the Zoom chat box, if you can go to the Zoom chat box, but we're also keeping an eye on the Pathable Zoom chat box. So Pathable chat box, should I say, and whatnot. So if I know some of you only have one screen on, so you have many more opportunities to share. But here at ITEP, what we're going to do right now is actually talk about our tribes and climate change adaptation planning process that we've been doing for a while. And there's a number of organizations, becoming countless organizations now, that are doing adaptation planning, coming up with their own frameworks, coming up with different strategies. One size doesn't really fit all. All these, you can pick and choose from the different frameworks that are out there and make it work for your community. We focus on tribal adaptation planning, but some of the methods that we suggest can work for cities. They can work for small towns. They can work for several tribes that may want to work together, or communities that want to work together. So we're just giving you a short glimpse of what we have to offer. And if you want to do more, you can join us at one of our courses that we're going to and usually offer virtually. And what we do is often go nationwide with these courses. We do it regionally. So our upcoming course, for example, we are partnering with the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe in Northern California and the Northwest and the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Centers, and also FEMA, to bring together 2 courses. One's on adaptation planning for tribes, and then we're going to move into how you can insert climate change into tribal hazard mitigation planning. So that's later this fall. So that's just kind of an example of what we do. And we will probably host one in Alaska, you know, maybe hopefully the Northeast, we're trying to work with some tribes, a couple tribes from there. So that's what we have been doing. And Colleen, thank you for putting our upcoming training courses link in the chat box. So before we move on, I wanted to ask you guys another question. So if you can put in the chat box or even speak up, how are you or your tribe community preparing to address climate change? Maybe you're already in progress, or you're already talking with people, or you're already putting it into action. So if you could share something that you're doing, let us know, because we really want to hear from you. For example, one thing I guess my community, the Dene Nation, have been doing is well, maybe not, but like these communities have been doing is putting solar panels out, because we don't have any more, thankfully. Well, we only have a few of them, a couple more, I think, coal plants. Peabody coal mine thankfully shut down. Navajo generating station also shut down, so they're looking towards renewable energy that's more sustainable for our region. Specifically is solar panels, solar farms and whatnot. So that's one thing we're trying to do in our community. Does anybody want to volunteer? Any ideas? It could be simple as recycling. I think Kelsey dropped out. Nope. Colleen, can you think of any examples that you see on the res, or anywhere else that you've been?
I think that when the pandemic hit last year, when it first hit, I think a lot of people across the US and across the world, I think we're really looking at learning how to garden and grow your own food. I think we've, as Indigenous peoples, I think relearning that was really something that I saw at least across the US. And because I worked on a fact sheet around the pandemics and climate change, and found how some different organizations, individuals, and communities were coming together to, maybe build more hoop houses, like greenhouse type structures outside to grow food, or coming together safely, as a community to grow your own food. So that's one way that I saw, I think, people preparing, I think, for future, I think not just climate change, but also any future pandemics or other things that might, hinder our food and our water. So any examples like that your community has done, or even as your own family has done, please share that. Since we're a small group, we would love for you to share those ideas here today.
Right on. Yeah, Colleen, appreciate it. We do, yeah, that's really interesting how a lot of these techniques were shift back towards what we were used to doing before we a lot of us started depending on, the supermarkets and, easy access foods and water. We do have a couple comments in the chat box. Bill says they're utilizing geothermal and solar on campus. That's something I'm really interested in, is the geothermal heating of buildings and whatnot. Do you want to share a little bit more about that, Bill?
Yeah, we instigated this, a few years ago in our library, for one. We built a new library, and and we put in geothermal to not fully to heat and cool the library, but if it gets too cold, then geothermal, it needs an additive. Then we need to use a furnace, But if it gets but the nice thing about geothermal, it keeps a nice cooling temperature. Underneath the ground, it's about constantly 55 degrees. So we put these pipes. There's a geothermal field, and we have these pipes that run through it, and then like antifreeze runs through it, these pipes, and is pumped into the library. So that's how we heat and cool the library, using the natural heat of the ground. Even though it gets very cold here in Wisconsin, even 6 feet down, it's 50 degrees. So we utilize that heat that's underneath the ground. So that's how we use geothermal. And another part of our campus building is also, little by little, we've taken different buildings and converted them to geothermal.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I'm really interested in that. I know a lot of universities overseas also use that. I can't remember what campus on the East Coast does that too. One of the
So it can be heating and cooling, both of them.
Cooling.
With like I said, it's like 50 degrees, and then you pump that through the building, and then you need your furnace to kick it up to like 70 degrees. But it's a lot easier. It saves you a lot of money going from 50 to 70 than it does from, absolute freezing to 70, like in the wintertime.
That is really interesting. When we hear the word thermal, we instantly think about heating. So I'm glad that you said that. Thank you, Bill.
Yep, sure.
I appreciate that. I'm going to look more into that. Marissa was saying that they're retrofitting homes and buildings for energy efficiency, like insulation, weather strips around doors. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. Within the state of Massachusetts, there's a I guess there's a fund set aside by the natural gas and electricity companies that they administered, I guess, by the state. There's significant incentives for insulating your home, and that has led to some community-wide, I would say, incentives. So this program covers a lot of the costs. It requires navigating some administrative bureaucracy, but it overall, I think, has accelerated the pace of insulation, which is one step that we can do to reduce our fossil fuel consumption. And as part of the state's plan to, the state is trying to motivate to reduce CO2 emissions by at least 80% of below 1990 levels by 2050. And so another way that there's been local interest is just what those pathways are, and whether it'll be solar or whether it'll be other processes. And particularly locally, there's some controversy over whether biomass will be permissible.
Thank you, Marissa. Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of little I know about biomass. There's a lot of controversy. There's people are trying to see what the benefits and the cons are of it. So I'm interested to hear more about that too. So thank you for bringing that up. Omar was saying that some tribal communities he has worked with are using green infrastructure to reduce flooding impacts from extreme precipitation events. Yes. Thank you, Omar, for sharing that. Yeah, these are all really good examples. And, you know, I think we're all from opposite ends of the coast, you know, different regions, but some of these same preparation methods can be, you know, interchangeable no matter where we're at and whatnot. So thank you for participating. Much appreciated. I don't see anyone. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to continue on with the presentation and talk about, you know, mitigation versus adaptation. Some of you may have some definitions that you like to go by. For tribal adaptation planning, we like to distinguish between mitigation and adaptation for the purpose that you know, just to make sure that we have the definitions down pat, and what it informs the type of plan that people are writing. So tribal nations all over the country are coming up with tribal adaptation plans, tribal hazard mitigation plans. And our colleague Kelsey and Karen are deep in the tribal hazard mitigation planning cohort that has been online for a while now, over 6 months, maybe almost 6 months, working with various tribes across the country, including FEMA, the tribal climate liaisons from BIA, and so forth. So we have a lot of partners that we're grateful to work with. So mitigation, we define it as dealing with the causes. So you're taking actions that reduce the level of greenhouse gases, GHGs, in the atmosphere. You know, doing solar, converting to completely electric cars for campus vehicles. Tribal vehicles are trying to put in charging stations for electric vehicles, or making sure they're retrofitting their vehicles to make sure that they don't emit as much CO2 or carbon dioxide as they have been in the past. A lot of our tribal vehicles are often outdated, and they are emitting more carbon dioxide. And so thankfully ITEP has been working with the VW settlement that happened a few years ago in order to help them get some tribes who applied get some funds to bring in better vehicles, updated vehicles for their communities. And also, and then adaptation, we're dealing with the effects of climate change. So we're taking these actions that minimize the impacts, the weaknesses, instead of exposing them and catching us off guard. So in Flagstaff, I'll just use myself as an example of how we are doing that. In my home, you know, we live out in the country, about 20 minutes from town. And I say country because we can have horses, and like me, I have 46 chickens. And but we also have rain barrels, and we're getting bigger ones, so we can actually capture that rainwater and use it to water chickens, you know, the gardens that we have and whatnot. So we're doing that. But also, you know, as Omar mentioned, a lot of the flooding impacts, there's a lot of tribes that are building restoring riparian areas to try and prevent the soil, beach erosion, and whatnot. So I know that also in southern Arizona, I believe, or maybe southern California too, people are planting trees along the Colorado River to try and stabilize the soil and whatnot, because everything's drying out and it's getting hotter and hotter down south especially too. So just the distinction between mitigation and adaptation. You also may have heard of the different adaptation planning frameworks that are out there. What I mean by framework is like a plan, you know, the steps that people, communities, organizations take specifically to lay out a plan on what they're going to do about climate change. And so you may be familiar with these up here. If you want more information, we can definitely send that to you, but Google is also a really good partner in that, but we can send it to you probably quicker than going through all the million searches that it comes up with. So we have a tribal climate change adaptation plan template that we created for tribes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's also the tribal climate adaptation menu. I believe they have a session tomorrow. I could be wrong, tomorrow or Wednesday, on their adaptation menu that specifically uses Ojibwe, Anishinaabe language, and drawings to really talk about how climate change is impacting their community, but also how they view non-humans as their relatives, as Dan Wildcat was saying this morning. So it's really holistic and comprehensive. There's also the Tribal Climate Adaptation Guidebook, which was created by numerous organizations in 2018. But it's it also, I think it has like 5 steps also, but it also shows you a lot of the climate adaptation plans that were written by tribes, and kind of the steps that they took, and they go kind of more in depth into what specifically these tribes did. The Tribal Climate Change Health Project that the Pala Band of Mission Indians is helping out with is also, I know it says University of Oregon, but I think they're a partner, but the Pala Band of Mission Indians are the ones that really are putting this health project together, a database that is helping out. And Kelsey, thank you for putting the links into the chat box to the various plans that I'm mentioning. But also, you know, there's the World Wildlife Federation. They have their own steps in their climate framework. I know that the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, one of our partners, they also have like 3 or 4 steps on how to go about climate adaptation planning. There's many of them out there. So resources that for you to pick and choose from and find what works best for you. A lot of cities also have adaptation plans that are really comprehensive. Some are really technical, some are really simple. So I would just, you know, click on, you know, if you're, say, San Francisco and climate adaptation plan, they may have one, but I know California alone has a lot. It depends on what city or town that you're from, so and whatnot. So yeah, I know that the community of La Jolla, California, they also have a lot. They have their own like adaptation plan for beach erosion, rising seawater, and whatnot. So it's really neat what you can find out there. So the planning process here at ITEP that we came up with based on numerous resources is called SADIE, specifically that specifically to engage tribes, and with really tribes, indigenous communities in mind of how they could go about adaptation planning. And throughout the whole process, we really encourage the engagement of the community members, not just people with the titles of climate change coordinator or the environmental director and so on. We really want people from all walks of life in the community to work together, using traditional knowledges, local knowledges, if you don't have indigenous knowledge. I like to call traditional indigenous knowledges, plural, and really have that local part of it. You know, there's, you know, you may not be indigenous to the lands that you're living on now, but you may have been living there for, you know, 20, 40, 50 years, or you have your knowledge from your grandmother, grandparents passed down to you. I mean, and then you have an idea of how the land is working, how it works, and whatnot, and you have seen the changes. I call that local knowledge. So it's really important that you also engage that part of the process, so it's a holistic process instead of one-sided. or exclusive, you want it to be inclusive. So, and it's a living document. A lot of tribes were saying that they would write a document and then like a management plan, and it would sit on the shelf and gather dust. And they really, so even changing the language of how you view documents is really important. So it maintains that motivation to keep going. Okay, so then so it's a living document, but for this phase, we're really going to focus on phase one. I'm going to talk about phase one, scoping and engaging first. So really quick, I want to give you the acronym SADE. This kind of comes out to that. Scope the plan, assess your strengths, your weaknesses. D is determining your options and actions, your strategies. And then I's implement and monitor, evaluate, and adjust will round out the project or the process. So I'm going to just go through number one real quick. But also another question for you all. A question, what is important to you and to your community, your tribe, or maybe just to you, in climate change adaptation planning? So for me, what it really is important to me is right now is probably water. I really think about water all the time, and how my community is developing at a really high rate that makes me concerned about the availability of water. And now there's reports out that Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at low levels to where they probably won't be able to recover at rates that we're used to. Instead of the communities being asked to reduce their water intake or water use, they're talking more about how they can get more water from other places. So that's just kind of not a new development. But can you all put it in the chat box or speak up about what is important to you, your tribe, and your community? Put water in the chat box. Remember, use the Zoom chat box if you can. Carey, did you want to say anything, or no? No pressure. I just saw your thing light up. She says, my focus is also water. Where are you from, Carey? Because I asked that because even if we're living in areas like the Great Lakes state, where our concern can also still be water. Yep, Minnesota, lots of water. Bill says forests. Yes, definitely. Colleen or Kelsey, what do you guys think? What are your ideas? Energy independence is Kelsey's thing, very much so. Marissa is saying that extreme dangerous heat, especially, yes, in paved areas. Yes. Andrew is saying water resources in New England. Yes, water. No, that's really, really interesting. Ashley is also saying water. The changes in freshwater fish communities that are underway in Wisconsin are going to change some of the ways that people interact with their lake. Yeah, that'll be really interesting how the community reacts to these changes, because change is not easy, but it's very much necessary.
I think water for sure, water and food. And one of the questions I like to ask on some of my presentations is to any audience, whether it's kids, adults, educators, is first, understanding where your water comes from. I think as Indigenous peoples, we do understand and know where our water comes from, but a lot of people that live in the cities still don't. They just think, have easy access to turning on a faucet and don't really know how and where it comes from. So I think understanding that as well. And I think we realized that again during the pandemic when I was talking about food, really, thinking about where our food comes from and what we're putting into our bodies, and that can affect us as well. So yeah, thank you all for sharing the importance of water.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, we all have different it's not just one concern. We have many, and it could be, you know, some of us, not me, but we have sheep and goats at home on the res. There's some people who are cattle heavy, bison heavy, focused, but also, you know, our traditional foods, whether that may be okra, cauliflower, corn for a lot of us, for all Indigenous communities. But, you know, like Ashley was saying, fish, a lot of fishing tribes are really concerned about their relatives, their foods, are your waterways, you know, that feed into your water table, but people use it for recreation, economic purposes, you know, tourism, fishing, and so on. Could be the big game too, that are migrating to cooler areas or to areas with more food and water. But also your community is really important, you know, and the health of your community, because if you're invested in your community, that's your number one concern of how healthy they're going to be in the future, thinking about the young kids. So yeah, so it's very, these are just a few of the things that I came up with that I've heard. But you know, in the planning area, the first stage, phasing and scope, phase one, scope and engage. You know, when you're starting to think about your adaptation planning process and even mitigation, you really want to think about establishing your team, because you cannot do it alone. It can be done, but you should not do it alone. It's a lot of work. You have other responsibilities. So think about your team size. Who would you like on your team? Who's going to lead the team? You need a champion, really. Maybe that could be one or two people or more people. For example, my favorite person in the whole world, besides in the adaptation field, I mean, I have a lot of favorites, but it's Mike Durglow of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe. And he is the champion and has been leading that team for, I think, since he attended an ITEP training before 2009, and now he and his tribe are one of the leading tribes, communities on adaptation planning. They're going through their second or third iteration of their adaptation plan, and Karen and I had a chance to go to their one of their gatherings, and there was like over 40 people there. There's this 2-day meeting. Actually, it was a 1-day or 2-day meeting. It was amazing. There was people from the tribal college there, but these are the same people that kept coming and whatnot. And but so that's kind of like the larger planning team, and then you got to decide how team decisions will be made. It's not just because Kelsey says it's so that it should happen, but you want it to be a collective effort and whatnot. And also, what are your guiding values? What are your principles? You know, think about communication, how you're going to communicate, whether some team members can be virtual and the rest be in person, email, maybe Microsoft Teams. There's so many tools out there that you can use, and also who your core team is. So at ITEP, our core team is Kelsey, Karen, Colleen, Anne Marie, you know, the ladies that I showed you. But then outside of that, we have like Stefan Tangent from the North Central Cask and the other climate science liaisons. We have BIA, we have EPA, we have people from the Desert Research Institute, the Climate Science Alliance, so on. Those are kind of our team members also, because we don't do this alone. And also you want to, in this phase one, you want to decide on your planning topics. If water's at the top of the list, then so be it. And what we often say and recommend is that people really focus on a number of projects. There's 100 planning topics you can have, and maybe you just do 5 or 10 for now, like the most important ones, because maybe the ones that even have the climate information available to support your planning topics and why it should be addressed and so on. So you want to gather that initial climate information. going to different scientists, social scientists, indigenous scientists, observationists, and so on, community members, that also feed into the kind of resources that you're going to need. Resources can be like, not just the scientific indigenous knowledge information, but also the people are resources that have that knowledge that can help inform your process. Also, the partnerships is a type of resource, but also, like I said, we have a lot of partners that we couldn't do this work alone. The timeline, do you want to accomplish that in 5, 10 years, maybe 2 years? That depends a lot on your funding, right? The funding that you have. Also, you want a planning guide. You kind of want like a checklist, and I'll talk a little bit more about a checklist that we have. We also, what are your goals? What is your purpose? What's your vision for this adaptation plan, or mitigation plan? Because that will kind of inform the rest of your process. It's really, I think it's really important to have your goals and your vision, and they can change later on. But these are kind of the nitty-gritty of what you need to get started and to keep going and whatnot. Okay, so I don't know if there's any questions on that one, but I want to move into the phase 3. Remember, we were at phase 1, scoping out the plan and kind of gathering your team together, the information, what kind of resources you need, your timeline, what kind of funding is out there. Funding resources can be few of them out there, but it feels like a few of them are out there, but there's more diversity in funding coming out from foundations, from not just the federal agencies, the nonprofits that are out there. You can piece together so many of these resources to accomplish your plan also. But really quick, I want to get into the phase 3. I'm going to skip to phase 3 and talk about your determining your options and your actions. And so, Carey, did you want to say anything? I just saw your thing light up. No pressure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I wasn't muted.
That's okay. We didn't hear anything. I don't know why I kept seeing that thing pop up. But feel free to ask questions in the chat box, please. I'm going pretty fast. Like I said, we only have 75 minutes. So, let's see, determining your actions. Yeah, again, kind of looking to see what you're doing already, so you're not reinventing the wheel. What are other cities, other towns, what other tribes are doing, people in your region, but also look outside the region to see if there's some really successful examples. If you're in the north east, or the Midwest or the Northeast, just because the shifting seasons is kind of based out of Wisconsin, that you can look to your folks there. Maybe Bill knows a lot of folks at his university he could put you in contact with to see what they're doing. So try not to try not to reinvent the wheel. You can do these by talking with people, making those type of connections, going to conferences and attending different sessions. You will learn a lot from what people are saying and who they're working with. They can give you a really good idea of what's out there. Also, a literature review. You have up and coming students that can help you with lit reviews. I have done that before, and it's been one of the most valuable tools that was given to me as a professional. Now I know what it is and how much it can be helpful. But also look to the different adaptation plans. Like I mentioned that I think I did mention there's over 60 adaptation plans, vulnerability assessments, strategic plans that are out there specifically on adaptation planning. So on climate change, addressing climate change impacts, but also look to your climate adaptation science centers, your climate hubs, your USGS, your federal agency partners, and so on. So you can do it in a variety of methods, or you can just go to Kelsey and email her and she can tell you what you need to know, find that information and whatnot. So, think about what your vulnerabilities are and what your strengths. So you really want to brainstorm ways to address and utilize what you have now, ways to address your vulnerabilities, should I say, and also utilize what you have now. What are your strengths? It could be a good example is that as Chris Caldwell, one of our keynote speakers, was talking about the 1854 Treaty Authority. They did a climate change assessment, vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan, and they actually got 3 tribes and working together on this plan. Because they have that ceded territory, trust lands, ancestral lands that they hunt, fish, and gather foods on. But yeah, so they kind of came together and they kind of utilized that strength of their connection and their similarities in their region. But also, think about what's going on out there, kind of be creative. There's wetland restoration by the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, levee construction in North Dakota. I know that somewhere in Wisconsin, a lot of communities are redoing their culvert system because they have a lot of precipitation events that have been happening more and more. But also, in the Navajo Nation, they have also, Dr. Margaret Heiza Redsteer actually did a project with students that ITEP recruited to use sand sausages to stabilize the sand dunes. And this was a method that was tried in Mongolia. And so she kind of brought that method over and said, hey, I want to try it out and see if it works here. And so she had these students really working out there, because these sand dunes actually restrict people from going in and out if they're not addressed properly or sooner than later. But yeah, so kind of be creative in that sense also. Determine what your what you need to educate your community for them to be aware and to be prepared, come up with a communication plan. It could be as simple as doing gardens. I know there's the Chisha, or is it Chisha? Chiji farms, beaver farms out here in the Navajo Nation. They're small nonprofits that are actually putting up hoop houses in different communities. They're putting up these hoop houses so people can grow their vegetables and give it back to their community members and whatnot. So also rainwater collection, but also social media. That there's some of us that don't have great internet, but some of us do. And there's many resources out there through texting, through WhatsApp, that you can really inform your community. I know there's some tribes in Northern California that are still under strict COVID non-travel during this COVID time, and they're trying to come up with a communication plan with their small community of how to engage them to be aware of climate change, but to be prepared for wildfire season, to be prepared for flooding and so on. But also maybe there's a new construction of a tribal building that's using geothermal energy. They're really trying to educate people on how to do that, how that can happen. Remember, these actions, do they fit in with your broader community? Do the benefits outweigh the costs, or vice versa? Are they flexible? Can they be revised later on? Is it feasible for your community? Is it just a Band-Aid fix? A lot of us do Band-Aid fixes, and then we find out, and more work is needed when we should have done, we should have planned for the future in the long term. Low-hanging fruit, meaning, is it a good opportunity to grab? Windows of opportunity, partnerships, what authorities are needed to, leadership to kind of endorse these actions. what kind of funding, what kind of resources are out there. Yeah, so just kind of really brainstorm on ways your actions and your options can help your community. Okay, another question for the attendees that are still awake and with us. I'm just joking. I know you're all awake, but I want to also engage you again. We don't have too much time left, but I want you to share one example of what your community is doing. And if you don't mind sharing in the chat box or speaking out loud, that would be really great. I'll start off with an example of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, and we held a workshop there, and we're talking about this very topic. And this young man was saying, well, and woman too, they actually do a recycling project with the local youth at one of their county fairs, I believe, that they have, where every year they have youth come in and actually tell people, hey, recycled items over here, that's trash. And what they do is they weigh how much trash and how much recycling is compiled at the end of the event. And they have less trash because there's a lot of recycled items that have gone back to the center and not to the landfill. And so, yeah, they kind of, yeah, so that's kind of one adaptation action that they were doing. And they were really surprised when I told them this could be part of your adaptation plan. This is something that you're already doing that you could put into place, use as part of your plan. Does anyone else have an example that they'd like to share? Go to the chat box. Let's see. Go for it.
I'm going to pipe up since no one's talking right away. This is Carey. So I'm with a nonprofit. I'm not with a tribal community, but the nonprofit in Minnesota that I work for is currently exploring the capabilities to understand groundwater challenges and the capacity to address those, and then also, you know, the needs among governments across the Great Lakes states, so tribal governments, state governments, and then if there's any informal partnerships that are forming. And we hope that by the end of the year, we can bring together those people that want to, you know, discuss best practices for managing groundwater in this changing climate, and have kind of a shared community experience, shared practices for how to better manage groundwater. And it's the groundwater, not just for drinking, but the groundwater that recharges our cold water streams and keeps our lake levels from fluctuating too much. Those are all things that are changing right now.
Thank you, Carey. That is really interesting. And I think you bring up the point that during this process, you don't want to start from scratch. There's stuff that you're already doing that can already be included in your plan. Like Carey said about these partnerships that are already, you know, gathering the different partners that can be involved. That is already in progress, and that informed best practices, as she mentioned. And I think that's just wonderful that you've gotten the process started already. I wanted to mention an example of what the community is doing. Marissa, remember, she said they're retrofitting homes and buildings for energy efficiency. So that was something that you had mentioned. Bill was saying the campus participates in Recycle Mania National Campaign. Oh my gosh, we should all participate in that. That's wonderful, Bill. Thank you for sharing. I know that the city of Flagstaff has a composting business. Not the city of Flagstaff. There's a business in Flagstaff that can pick up composting, or people can drop off composting at that business location. So that's one thing that they're doing to try and alleviate the amount of trash that goes, or waste that goes to the landfill. Anne Marie saying that her and Shanto, her son, pick up trash behind mom's house in the alley. It's no man's land, so trash can go unclaimed. And she gets back there and she cleans it up. So it's true, every bit does help. And thank you, Anne Marie. Kelsey was saying that the city of Flagstaff came out with a climate action and adaptation plan recently. So that is pretty neat. One of the leading cities that's trying to do something about climate change, and our fellow colleague Dara Marks Marino is also heavily involved in that. But I also want to mention that every example, every bit helps, like Anne Marie said, is that, you know, here at my house, we started composting over 15 years ago. And I noticed that we used to have this huge trash can, and now we just have like a little trash can that we use. Our waste has gone down heavily over the years because we compost a lot and we do recycle a lot. And my kids now will call out people and say, hey, that is trash, that's recycle, or they'll pick a can out of the trash can. And whatnot. So they'll go to those lengths sometimes, and mostly because Colleen and I have really kind of just, you know, repeated that effort to them. So every bit helps. Thank you, Anne Marie. As we go into the final 15 minutes of our session, remember, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to put stuff in the chat box. Carey just put in a portfolio, I think, that she may have mentioned about groundwater and whatnot. So check that out. She put a link to it and whatnot. And if it's okay, we'll put that link in to everything else in the files box, but we can also send it to you. We also have this climate change adaptation template that I mentioned. So this is something I call a guide. I also call it a cheat sheet, because you're cheating that process. You're not starting from scratch. Okay. We don't want anyone to start from scratch. And this is kind of literally, you go through this document and there's items that are in red where you can fill in what your community's information in there. And it gives you a checklist of things that you should be doing, like creating partnerships, picking a leader, a timeline, potential funding, and so on. Also, if you're from a tribal community or you're working with a tribal community, there's a tribal resolution that often has to go before the council for them to approve the project so the project can go forth and whatnot. It's an endorsement of what you're doing and whatnot. But also a worksheet, there's a spreadsheet in there, the worksheet for your planning members that you can do together to plan out, figure out the planning topics. Also, there's number 9 is a really good one that we constantly have to update because people are so interested in this, is the tribal climate change assessment and plans. About over 60 of them now that we have mentioned that we know of. If there's one in there that's not in there, let us know. Colleen separated it by region. There's a region for the Midwest, the Northeast, and so on. So somebody's going to put that in the chat box, but check that out and see what tribes are doing. But this plan template adaptation plan template is really comprehensive, but it's made specifically so you can actually just put your information in there and have something together for your directors to approve of. But also remember, it's a living document and it can be changed and whatnot. So we can send this to you. It's online, but if you prefer to have a jump drive, those things that you put into your computer and all your files come up, if you're interested in that, we can send you some other resources too. If you're interested, we can send it to you in a jump drive. So if you want a jump drive of all the information that we have mentioned and are talking about, just send me, maybe send us a private message or a mailing address where we can mail it to you. We do have a little bit of funds to send you this jump drive of information instead of downloading it from the internet, which you can do, but this one you can carry where there's no internet access. So if you're interested in that, please message us or email us. They'll put our email in the chat box too. Again, there's a lot of planning frameworks out there. This is just one of them. The plan template is kind of like your cheat sheet, a really good guide for you to work off of to create your plan. But remember, there's a ton that are out there that's specifically for you to work off of. We can even send you a PDF of the tribal adaptation, the climate adaptation guidebook, the tribal climate adaptation menu and whatnot. I have great internet access, but I know a lot of my colleagues don't always have it. So let us know. We can send you that jump drive. Remember also on ITEP, visit our website. As Kelsey put in the chat box, we have this great tool called a mind map, and it kind of really breaks down the resources that are out there for tribes, but also for communities. I know a lot of you are not from tribal communities, but these can inform the process that you're doing or give you an idea of what kind of resources to look for. You know, there's the climate adaptation plans that are out there. There's funding resources. We have a great funding page that Kelsey keeps updated along with her colleague Clarence, working groups, newsletters, trainings, and whatnot. So there's so many out there. This can be a one-stop shop for you. We're trying to keep that updated as much as possible. So we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that you know, if someone really wanted to pipe up and talk, that we provide this talking circle, you know, share what you are doing or what you want to do. I know this was a really quick overview of what ITEP does, but it doesn't compare to what we do in person or and virtually. We have a lot of fun. We learn a lot from elders, our partners, federal science, Western scientists, and so on. So if you're interested, you know, look to our website or contact us if you want to get together, or I can help you out somehow. So I don't know, Kelsey, Colleen, or Anne-Marie, did I miss anything? Is there something that you want to bring up in the next? We have about 10 minutes left in the session.
No, just as Nikki said, please, if you have right now any questions or comments, it is a lot of information that Nikki covered. So please either verbally ask or you can put it in the chat box and we can get to those as well.
Mm-hmm. So during our in-person meetings, what we do like to do is these talking circles that really give a chance for the attendees to just kind of share what they're thinking, what they're feeling, because this process can be stressful when you think about the impacts in your community. And you want that support system, and that I really believe that ITEP provides that, or I tried to provide that as the manager of the program along with Karen, is that we want to provide a support system for the community, not just tribal communities. We have, you know, Flagstaff, San Diego, like that. We have a lot of partners in big cities is what I'm saying. Anne-Marie, did you want to say anything? Grace us with your lovely presence.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the great presentation. It's so good to see the team in action. I'm coming to you from my homelands in Arizona, so hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you. As we start off and kick off Earth Week, I want to thank the coordinators for this event, but also to all of you warriors out in the field that are working on the ground and really serving your communities. You know, a lot of our work goes unseen. A lot of the stress that we endure goes unseen. So I'm just here to say that as I say my prayers, I always recognize and thank you all for the work that you do, because for 7 generations to come, that is our responsibility. And I really want to say, yeah, in Chicago, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, Anne-Marie, really appreciate it. I know she's got a busy schedule, so I'm so glad that you joined us. I just want to say that, I was looking through the chat box, and Ashley, you might know of this or be interested in this, is that a lot of tribes are really upping their tribal fish hatcheries in order to feed their community, but also try and address the warming waters that are occurring in the lakes, the rivers, waterways in the tribal communities and whatnot. So I know that the Micmac tribe in northeast, where's the northeast? Maine, in Maine, Prescott Isle, Maine. They have actually really put together a tribal fish hatchery that does exactly that, is bring community back together by them creating their fish hatchery. They have a big garden and whatnot. So it's that we have a tribal profile online. Kelsey or Colleen, if you could put the tribal profile link in the chat box, that would be really wonderful. So I think that's really great. And you're talking about transforming governance. You really should look to the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe. They are a small tribe, but I think they're a really good model for how supportive their leadership is. They had the same leadership, you know. They don't change out every 4 years like my Navajo Nation government does, but they actually work with the tribe. And if you look at their social media, it's like exploding every day of the wonderful stuff that they're doing. So if the leadership supports the community, they can do so many things. And like the Swinomish tribe up in Washington State, their government, their leadership has always supported this climate change movement. Before it was trendy, before Obama made it okay to say climate change, global warming, you know. So I think that's really a really good example of what's going on out there. Tribal communities are really ones that we should all look to because we're sovereign nations. So we have been really trying to show our sovereignty and that power by showing that we have adapted to climate change and we're still adapting to it. We've adapted to relocation, assimilation efforts, and now it's climate change. You know, Anne Marie, if you ever get a chance to hear Anne Marie talk about that, I think it's really, really something that we should look to and whatnot. So I don't know if anyone else has something to say or share. Get out there. So Marissa, I was in where was I? Chicago, I think. I don't know. I was visiting family somewhere in the Midwest or East Coast, and I went to a Target parking lot and it was completely white. Have you all seen a white parking lot? It was amazing. And I asked somebody and they said it's to actually reduce like the heat coming, you know, that, you know, dark pavement absorbs more heat, therefore gives more heat. But this parking lot was completely white and I was so amazed by it. But not all the parking lots in that city were like that. It was just that one I went to. And Kelsey, you've seen roadways and streets painted white. Yeah, I think more people should paint or have white roofs too, so it doesn't absorb that heat. Your house doesn't absorb the heat as much too. So I think that's one thing I've seen. Carey, thank you. The Shakopee Sioux community are leaders in Minnesota. Yes, definitely. That's one tribe I really need to study a little bit more. A lot of good tribes in Minnesota doing great stuff. She put a really great link in there. Okay, we have about 3 minutes. If no one is dying to say something, I think we'll just close out. But we really appreciate you joining us today. And please contact us if you have questions. Anything that we like to be connectors also, ITEP. We're connectors. If we can't help you with the work, if we can't help you in some way, we will find somebody who does. And I really appreciate you all being here. And remember, don't forget to message us if you want a jump drive of all the information that we talked about. Please do. We do have that. We do have that capability. So with that, Kelsey or Colleen or Anne Marie, anybody else want to say anything before we take off?
Hi, Nikki. Yeah, I can say something. I just wanted to share with folks that we'll actually be doing a second session tomorrow as part of the Shifting Season Summit. So, you know, if this definitely sparked your intrigue, we invite you to join us tomorrow. And if not, you know, there'll be a recording. So definitely refer back and catch tomorrow's session. That will be on mostly focused on indigenous and tribal knowledges, I believe. So yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I totally forgot about that. I didn't forget about it, but I just forgot to bring it up. So yeah, we'll be focusing on how you can how people are inserting traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge into adaptation or mitigation planning, and give a few examples and whatnot. And so I'll have you guys talk too if you join us. But with that, I think we can go ahead and close the session. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you, and you really are in all of our prayers for good health and good well-being for you and your family. So take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you hopefully tomorrow. So thank you, Colleen and Kelsey, and we can